The autumn wind swept across the valley as Marcus Whitmore stood on his wraparound porch, surveying the preparations unfolding across his sprawling ranch. Tables stretched end to end beneath strings of warm lights, creating a golden pathway through his property. His staff moved with practiced efficiency, arranging chairs, setting plates, and preparing for what had become an annual tradition, a Thanksgiving feast for every single resident of Millbrook Valley. Marcus was known throughout the region as the rich rancher who had made his fortune in cattle and land development, but more importantly, as the man who never forgot where he came from. 15 years ago, he'd started this tradition with just a handful of neighbors. Now, the entire town of nearly 300 people would gather at his table, sharing food, stories, and gratitude under the Montana sky. He adjusted his BLO tie and watched his ranch hands carry out enormous turkeys from the outdoor kitchens. The smell of roasting meat, fresh baked bread, and cinnamon from countless pies filled the air. Everything had to be perfect. Marcus insisted on it every year, not out of pride, but out of love for these people who'd become his extended family. "Mr. Whitmore, where do you want the children's table set up?" called out Sandra, his head housekeeper who'd been with him for over 2 decades. "Same as always, Sandra. Near the fire pit, where they can roast marshmallows after dinner. But not too close, we don't want any accidents." She nodded and hustled off, clipboard in hand. Marcus smiled watching her work. Sandra had been skeptical of his grand feast idea at first, thinking it an eccentric rich man's folly. But she'd seen how it brought the community together, how it healed rifts and created bonds. Now she was as invested in its success as he was. The sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Trucks and cars started arriving, kicking up dust on the long driveway that led to his property. Families emerged, children running ahead while parents carried covered dishes despite Marcus's insistence that they bring nothing. Old farmers arrived in their best flannel shirts, business owners from town in Sunday clothes, and everyone in between. Marcus greeted each person personally, shaking hands, hugging longtime friends, and welcoming newcomers who'd moved to Millbrook Valley throughout the year. There was Tom Chin, who ran the hardware store and always had a joke ready. The Hernandez family with their 5 boisterous children. Elderly Mrs. Patterson, who Marcus knew would probably cry during grace. She cried every year, moved by the gathering's warmth. Pastor Williams and his wife brought their infectious laughter. Sheriff Dixon came with his teenage daughter, who was home from college. The tables filled quickly with neighbors settling into conversations, old friendships rekindling and new ones forming. Marcus moved through the crowd, making sure everyone felt welcome, that no one sat alone unless they preferred it. His heart swelled watching the community he loved come together. This was what wealth was truly for, not hoarding it behind gates, but using it to create moments of connection and joy. As the sky darkened and stars began to appear, Marcus made his way to the head of the main table. It was time for the blessing, time to begin the feast. But as he approached his seat, his eyes fell on a particular chair at the far end of the long table, positioned where it could see the whole gathering. The chair sat empty, a place setting before it, untouched and waiting. His breath caught in his throat. His chest tightened. That chair. Sandra appeared at his elbow, her expression understanding and sad. "I set it up like always, Mr. Whitmore. I thought." "You did right, Sandra." "Thank you." His voice came out rougher than intended. He stood there, frozen, staring at that empty chair while laughter and conversation swirled around him. 15 years. 15 years of these gatherings, and that chair had never been filled. He set a place there every single year, hoping against hope, knowing it was foolish but unable to stop himself. The chair was for his son Daniel. Marcus closed his eyes, and the memories flooded back as they always did. Daniel, his only child, had been brilliant and stubborn, full of ideas about justice and fairness that didn't always align with his father's pragmatic business sense. They'd argued often during Daniel's teenage years, arguments that grew more heated as Daniel got older. The final fight had been catastrophic, 20 years ago, when Daniel was just 22. "You made your money exploiting this land and these people," Daniel had shouted. You buy up properties when families can't pay their debts. You play at being a benefactor while you're really just another rich man keeping everyone dependent on you. That's not fair and you know it. Marcus had fired back. I've helped this community. I've created jobs. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. He tried to compose himself, but looking at that empty chair, thinking of all the years of silence, of all the words left unsaid, the apologies never delivered or received, it was too much. A tear escaped, rolling down his weathered cheek. Then another. Pastor Williams squeezed his shoulder. He might still come, Marcus. There's always hope. I don't even know if he's alive anymore. Marcus whispered, voicing the fear that haunted his darkest nights. It's been so long since I've heard anything. What if all these years I'd been waiting for someone who... He couldn't finish the sentence. The pastor started to respond, but a commotion near the driveway caught their attention. Heads were turning, conversations pausing. Someone was arriving late, walking up the pathway between the tables. Marcus wiped his eyes quickly and turned to see who had come. Through his blurred vision, he saw a figure approaching, a man in his early 40s, with gray streaking through dark hair, walking with a slight limp. The man's face was uncertain, almost fearful, but his eyes were searching the crowd until they landed on Marcus. Time stopped. The world narrowed to just that face, those eyes, older, worn by life, but unmistakable. Daniel? Marcus's voice broke on his son's name. Daniel stopped about 20 feet away, standing awkwardly as the entire gathering fell silent, sensing something momentous was unfolding. Hi, Dad. I hope I'm not too late for dinner. I got your invitation. Marcus couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. 20 years of absence, of silence, of hurt and longing, all crystallized in this single impossible moment. You came, he managed to say. I almost didn't, Daniel admitted, his own voice shaking. I've started driving here 3 different times over the years and turned back. But this year, life's too short, Dad. And I heard stories about what you do here, about how you've opened your home. Maybe I was wrong about some things. Maybe I was too harsh. Or maybe we were both wrong and both right, and none of it matters anymore compared to the time we've lost. The dam broke. Marcus moved forward, his legs feeling young despite their years, closing the distance between them. Daniel met him halfway, and they collided in an embrace that was 20 years overdue. Both men were crying openly now, not caring who saw, not caring about anything except this moment of reconciliation. I'm sorry, Marcus sobbed into his son's shoulder. I'm so sorry for everything. For being too proud, too stubborn. For not coming after you harder. I'm sorry too, Daniel interrupted. For walking away. For staying away. For wasting all these years we could have had together. They held each other while 300 people watched in respectful silence, many wiping away their own tears. Finally, Marcus pulled back, keeping his hands on Daniel's shoulders as if afraid he might disappear. You're really here. I'm here. And if you'll have me, I'd like to stay. Not just for today. I moved back to Montana last month. I've been working up the courage to reach out. Marcus pulled him close again, then turned to the gathered crowd, his arm around his son. Everyone, this is Daniel. My son. He's come home. The applause started with Tom Chun and rippled through the gathering, building into a roar of approval. These people understood family, understood reconciliation, understood the miracle they were witnessing. Marcus guided Daniel to that empty chair, the one he'd sat faithfully for 15 years. As Daniel sat down, Marcus took his own place beside him at the head of the table. He looked out at the faces of his community, his extended family, and then at his son, finally filling that chair. When he stood to say grace, his voice was strong despite the emotion coursing through him. Friends, neighbors, family, this year I have more to be thankful for than I ever dared dream. You've taught me that a table isn't complete when it's full of food. It's complete when it's full of love, of forgiveness, of second chances. Let us give thanks. As heads bowed and Marcus offered his prayer, Daniel reached over and took his father's hand. Across the table, Sandra caught Marcus's eye and smiled through her tears, nodding at the chair that was finally, blessedly occupied. The feast that followed was the finest Marcus had ever hosted, not because the food was any better than previous years, but because the empty chair was empty no more. Father and son talked long into the night, beginning the slow work of rebuilding what had been broken, of understanding who they each had become in the years apart. That empty chair had made Marcus cry countless times over the years, tears of regret, of loss, of stubborn hope. But this year's tears were different. They were tears of joy, of gratitude, of a prayer finally answered. The chair that had symbolized absence now symbolized return, and Marcus knew that every year of waiting, every unanswered invitation, every moment of faith that his son might someday come home had been worth it for this one perfect Thanksgiving.